In a world where bigger is better, the past decade has seen the traditional combustion engine slowly whittle down in size. Yet somehow, power figures continue to grow. The Mark I VW Golf came with a 1.1 litre engine, putting out a measly 49 horsepower. Yet it was enough to take you and 3 other mates wherever you wanted to go. This Polo in front of me has not only lost displacement, now at just 1 litre, it's also lost a cylinder. And although engines have shrunk over the years, the cars they power have only ever gotten bigger. This Polo is now the same size as a Mark IV Golf. So can an engine as small as this really keep up with the motorway crowd? Well, today we're going to find out by taking it into the real world. My name's Tom and you're watching Paragon Cars. Let's go. Now, whilst this is a 1 litre engine, it does have a very much needed turbocharger. We'll get onto why it needs it later, but first let's look at some figures. 95 brake horsepower and 175 Newton meters zips this car along the tarmac at a pretty fair pace. It'll manage 0 to 60 in 10.8 seconds, so it's not unbearably slow, but what matters most is its real world acceleration, e.g. getting onto a motorway. So let's have a look and see what it does on the 30 to 70 sprint. The fastest time we managed was 10.01 seconds. And I know it doesn't look very fast when you compare it to the rest of the cars we've done, but I have to say it is enough for everyday use. Because of the turbo, it means you don't have to downshift through gears to access the power. You just put your foot down in third and that will get you all the way up to 70 miles an hour. Let's now have a look at the inside. Coming to the front, this Beats Edition Polo presents itself as the slightly quirky one out of the Polo lineup. A lighter interior with the Beats logo embossed on the seats and some red trim dotted around really brighten up what is mainly a purely functional cabin. It may not be a tech fest, but it's got nearly everything you want, from air conditioning, cruise control, Apple CarPlay, and enough storage for even the biggest bottles. The only thing that's lacking is the centre armrest, but with interior dimensions much closer to a Golf than you might think, I guess they have to differentiate them somewhere. Being a VAG car, the controls are reliably fast and exactly where you want them, so a stress-free experience so far then. But what about the back and the boot? This is a small car after all. Well, this MQB AO platform seems to have only shrunken things on the outside, as rear legroom doesn't feel that far off the Golfs, to be honest. The boot is also pleasantly big. At 351 litres, it'll carry all the stuff you'll ever need when you take your mates to the festival. This car really feels like a TARDIS, but what's it like on the road? Let's find out. On the road in the little VW Polo. Let's start off with the initial impressions then. Well, at lower speeds, you'd expect this car to be pretty comfortable. We're riding on 16-inch wheels and we've got the comfort suspension in this car, and I have to say, it's perfect. There is literally zero complaints from me on that front. All the controls fall to hand really well, as you'd expect being a VAG car, but they're actually even better than I was expecting. The suspension over the bumps back there is just so well damped for such a small car. The only thing that you do have to get used to is the drum brakes at the rear. They can be a tad grabby, but once you're used to it, it's one of those things that you wouldn't even think about. The thing I actually really like from this car is the gear shift. All VAG cars tend to have quite a nice gear shift, but for some reason this one has a really nice gear shift. It's not notchy at all, everything feels deliberate and it feels quite mechanical. yet it's still really easy to use. It ties in really nicely with every other control in this car. Nothing in this car makes you put in a lot of effort. And that's what you want from a small hatchback. At lower speeds, the 3-cylinder engine puts out pretty much zero noise. It's only when you really rev it out that you hear it, and it has quite a nice thrum to it. I know it can be subjective, but I actually quite like the sound that this car makes. In terms of parking, these cars don't come with anything as standard, from parking sensors to a reverse camera. But being a small car, it's hardly hard to park. There's plenty of steering lock, and you can clearly see where the corners of the car are. Judging its size is very easy, and as you can see, we got in the space in one go. You don't really need parking sensors in a car this big. Coming out of junctions, this little 3-cylinder engine is ready to get up and go. You don't even have to give it much throttle. Alright, we're going to reset the trip computer now, and then we can see what MPG we get on the motorway. Okay, we're at a national speed limit now, so let's see how this Polo can handle. There's no sports mode in this, but if you want, you can turn off the traction control, but we'll leave it on because it still keeps the ESC on. Coming off roundabouts, we're only in 3rd gear, and this is where the turbo is definitely needed. You can see even lower down in the RPM range, it really gets the car moving. And I have driven an Ibiza without the turbo, and it was actually dangerous to drive because it was so slow. But getting up to 70 miles an hour in this car is no problem. Now on the motorway, we can talk about the other features of this car. First, let's start with road noise and wind noise. Well, road noise is actually pretty low. That's mainly because we're sitting on 16-inch wheels. But whilst they might sound small, they actually fit the car pretty well, I think. And wind noise, being a VAG car, wind noise is always kept to an absolute minimum in these types of cars. It's only very, very marginally louder than the Golf. But the Golf is already a really quiet car to be in. In terms of comfort, the seats themselves are very comfortable. There's a little less adjustability than I would like. You can't adjust the pitch of the seat base, and there's no adjustable lumbar support, but they've judged it pretty well, to be honest. In terms of visibility, this Polo is absolutely fantastic. Driving around town, there's plenty of visibility around, and as you saw before, parking was pretty easy. Changing lanes is also really easy in this car. The B-pillars are pretty thin, so you can see a lot of what's going on in your blind spot, and you're not having to look over your shoulder too much. The mirrors even have this little curved bit of glass on the end, so it allows you to see what's in your blind spot. And because this car's got a turbo, it means you can leave it in 5th gear when you're driving along the motorway. You don't have to downshift to accelerate when you're changing lanes. That's one thing that's actually pretty dangerous in the non-turbo version of this car. And of course, because this is the Beats edition, you get a Beats audio system. And I have to say, it's actually pretty impressive. Not only does it have really good bass, which you'd expect from a system like this, it's actually got pretty good mids and pretty good highs. Which means even if you're an audiophile, you can actually extract quite good sound quality from this system. Engine noise on the motorway is also kept to an absolute minimum. When you are doing a longer journey, you don't really want a lot of cabin noise coming from the engine. So overall, it's a very comfortable car. But what about the interior quality? Well, of course they've got to differentiate it from its bigger brother, the Golf. So the door cards, they're thinner, there's plastic here instead of squidgy material. The squidgy material is where you need it though. So where the armrest is, you're not going to get a sore elbow over a long journey. Surprisingly, the dash actually has quite a lot of squidgy material on it as well. And it means it's just slightly nicer to look at. In terms of creaks and rattles, VAG cars can be slightly hit and miss when it comes to this area. Sometimes you get a rattle that seems to just persist no matter what you do, but thankfully this car has actually been rattle free. We're going to do a few more miles on the motorway to see what our final MPG figure is, and then we're going to get on to some twisty roads. Okay, we finished our stint on the motorway and we managed 57 miles to the Callan. Now I know this is a small engine, but It's very rare that you actually see that figure from a car. A lot of manufacturers will claim crazy figures like 65 or 70, and then they end up getting, you know, maximum 51. This car has just done 57 mpg, and that's sitting at 70 miles an hour on the motorway. It's hard not to be impressed by that. Right, let's do some twisty road driving. Okay, we're on the twisty bit of road now, so let's see how it handles. We've got the traction in sport. Sadly, you can't turn the ESC all the way off in this car, but at least it'll let us have some fun. And as you can see, on a back road, second gear will get you up to 60 miles an hour. And there's something really satisfying about chucking these little cars around these roads. There's just so much room to move around in. And the balance of this chassis is pretty good actually for just a little car. The suspension is perfectly damped for those big bumps that you go over. And it reminds me a lot of those older little Golfs. And one thing that's not often mentioned with cars like this is because it's got so little power, it means you extract every ounce of performance that it's got to offer. And it makes it actually quite a lot of fun. It may not give you the gratification of overtaking someone at high speed. When you're just by yourself, you can really delve into the chassis of the car because it's not as capable as a performance car. You can really extract every ounce of fun it has to offer. Like coming around corners like this, you can feel the chassis moving underneath you. And you can feel the flex of the tyres in the sidewall. Yeah, we're in fourth gear and it will still happily get up to 60 miles an hour. That's why having a lot of torque is pretty good. And the steering is precise whilst being light. And don't you think the engine actually sounds all right? There's something to be said about cars that you can extract fully on the road, I think. A lot of us get way too obsessed with headline figures and Nürburgring lap times that we forget driving pleasure comes from a car that's been well sorted and one that feels mechanically satisfying to use. And the added bonus of this small engine is you can have a bit of fun and you can still get 48 miles to the gallon. This really is a good package if you were to buy this as your first car. You can get this on finance for £199 a month with nothing down. And it's actually got everything you need from a car. It's got 4 big seats, it's got a big boot, it's economical, it's actually quite good fun. And it's surprisingly refined when you want it to be. Plus the addition of a good sound system puts this above something like a Toyota Yaris. Okay, we're on our way back to the dealership now, so I think I'll wrap the video up here. As always, if you like the video, give it a like, and why not subscribe to our channel? Not only can you see more of these types of videos, you'll also be able to see all the stock we have for sale, including this car, and a lot of others that are a bit higher up when it comes to performance. I'll see you guys on the next one. Goodbye.